The primary objectives of the unit are to show students that, first of all, rhetoric really is everywhere, and also to help them think more critically about the decisions and choices that authors make when they're trying to accomplish a particular purpose for a particular audience. All right, how many of you have ever been in a situation where you had to convince somebody to do something that you wanted them to do, or to allow you to do something, like maybe your parents, something like that? Anybody? Show of hands. All the time. Okay, so this applies to everybody. Can anybody give us an example of a time recently where you've had to convince somebody of something? Manny, what you got?
Just last night, I convinced my mom to buy me a $75 hoodie.
A $75 hoodie?
Yes.
Okay, and how did you go about that? What was your approach?
Well, at first, I started begging, and when that didn't work, I tried to convince her that it was a good deal.
How did you convince her?
I told her that it was like 60% off, like a retail price, and it would be a good buy for this winter.
Okay, so the first time you approached your mom to the second time, they were vastly different. What were the differences in your approach?
Well, the first time I was like just begging and trying to like hope that she'll maybe get me the hoodie.
So what would you say your tone was?
I was taking it more like an emotional approach.
Okay. What about the second time, the time that you actually succeeded? How was that different?
Well, the second time I actually asked like about how much retail price off it would be, and it was like 60% off, and that really got her on board because she loves money.
Okay, so it's much more logical. All right, but what about your tone, like your attitude toward your mom in the situation the second time? How's that different than the first time when you were begging and pleading and desperate?
Well, the second time I was more calm, and I kind of reasoned with her about how like the money is important to save and stuff.
And you were successful, I suppose.
Yes, ma'am.
Is this your $75 hoodie?
Oh no, it's gonna come in like in a week.
Okay, somebody raise your hand and explain why Manny's first method didn't work, but his second approach did.
It had no logic to it.
Say that one more time?
It had no logic.
The first one had no logic, right? It was more probably emotional, less logical. The second time you actually made some reasonable claims with which your mom could get on board, correct? Okay, what you did, and you didn't know that you did it, but what you did is something that we call soapstone. Soapstone is just a helpful acronym for thinking about how to approach a situation or how to approach a text or something like that. One of the reasons that I use soapstone is because it's just a helpful acronym, and so students often find that that's beneficial to have something like that, and it does really encapsulate the different elements that students would want to consider in any sort of rhetorical context, even in their own lives. And I think that ultimately life is a classroom. And so I try to start most units actually with pulling things from their own lives, which is why I started with the question about how many of you have ever been in a situation in which you've had to convince somebody to do something, or your parents or whatnot. So the SOAPST all stand for something, and this is what soapstone stands for. Now don't write this down word for word. Remember, we've talked about just getting the key parts of the notes when we take them. The first F, or the first S, is who is the speaker. In Manny's case, who was the speaker? Manny was the speaker, right? O is the occasion. What's happening in the situation? What's the context? And what was the occasion here?
He wanted a hoodie.
He wanted a new hoodie, right? So the way that he went about it, the medium of his message, was to have a conversation with his mother, correct? Okay. Who was his audience? His mom. What was his purpose, Kate? To get the hoodie, right? A $75 hoodie. What was the subject? The hoodie. And then what was his tone? What was his tone the first time? Pleading, right? But we talked about how it wasn't logical. How do you think he might have changed his tone? Or Manny, maybe you can elaborate on this. How did you change your tone with take number 2?
Well, I used more like of a numbers approach, and $75 towards like $250. That's like about a 60% savings, and it's like 100 and.
All right, so that goes back to the logic that you use. The first time you were probably begging and emotional and that sort of thing, right? The second time, maybe you were a little bit more humble, right? You were much more calm and reasoned in what you were saying, and that appealed to your mom much more than the begging and the pleading, right? Okay, so soapstone is this acronym. Does everybody have the gist of the notes? So what we're going to do is we're going to watch a video. Now, some of you may be familiar with this. This is old school Mean Girls. We're going to watch Katie Heron's speech at the Spring Fling. If you remember from the film, she was selected as the Spring Fling Queen, right? But she had this transformation in her personality and how she treated people and that sort of thing. So she gives this speech at the Spring Fling dance. So we're going to listen to that speech. As we do this, I want you to note each of these things. So go ahead and make yourself a soapstone.
Well, half the people in this room are mad at me, and the other half only like me because they think I push somebody in front of a bus. So that's not good.
Well, it's not really required of you to make a speech.
It's not, I swear. To all the people whose feelings that got hurt by the burn book, I'm really sorry. You know, I've never been to one of these things before, and when I think about how many people wanted this, and how many people cried over it and stuff, I mean, I think everybody looks like royalty tonight. Look at Jessica Lopez. That dress is amazing. And Emma Gerber, I mean, that hairdo must have taken hours. Really pretty. So.
Together, let's talk about the occasion and what was happening. Can anybody tell us what was happening? Where are our Mean Girls fans in here? Anybody want to tell us? All right, Courtney, what's the occasion?
Well, Katie Heron has done a lot of awful things, and she is just being awarded as like the Spring Fling Queen.
Right.
And so she's using this as like an apology for all of the bad things that she'd done before.
And what sort of things has she done? Can you recall?
She wrote in the burn book a rude thing, and she's just been really awful to a bunch of people.
Including her own friends, spreading rumors about teachers, that sort of thing. So like Courtney said, this was her apology, right? So that's kind of what we're working here in terms of our context. So what I would like for you to do is go through this as a group and soapstone it. So talk about the speaker, the audience, the purpose, all of that. Pay particular attention to Katie's tone. What was her tone? And especially think about what she had to do to accomplish her purpose and to cater to that particular audience. So if she wanted to accomplish that purpose, what sort of things was she going to have to think about as she was coming up with that speech, okay? So soapstone it, talk about your tone, and then talk about what she had to do to cater to that particular audience to accomplish that particular purpose. Any questions? All right, let's go ahead and get started on that.
All right, so I think we all know that the speaker is Katie Heron.
There we go. That's one check.
And then the occasion is the Spring Fling. Audience is the student body, school body. And the purpose was to apologize.
Like making amends with everybody.
Make amends, yeah. And then the subject is, I had the crown.
I had like school pressures, but crown
I didn't really know what to put for a subject.
Yeah. And then the tone is apologetic.
Sympathetic.
Sympathetic, yeah.
Sincere. I put sincere.
All right, in terms of her purpose, think about what her ultimate message was. What message is she trying to send? You're right that she's trying to apologize, and that's part of her ultimate purpose, but also what message is she trying to send?
I
So it's like,
wanted to say that like everybody deserves a piece of the crown. Like everybody is royalty, not just the Mean Girls.
I had the crown doesn't really mean anything.
and her breaking it apart was like super big because it was her showing, this thing doesn't really mean that much to me like it does to all these other girls who think it's like the highest regard in the world to have this crown, and then she's also like, you guys deserve this high regard too. So
Yeah.
it's breaking it up.
so she like transitions from like an apologetic tone to like a more empowering tone at the end of the speech.
For tone, make sure we're using adjectives to describe her tone. What was her attitude, her approach? So that's good.
She talked about like her approach and strategies.
Well, Katie Heron is like cat. Oh, is that? Oh, my bad. She was doing all these like bad things. Like she wrote all this stuff in the burn book that's pretty funny and awful at the same time.
I think when she got on the stage, a little piece of like who she was before she turned into a mean girl started to show. Like she was really nice and sincere to everybody, as she was before.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so very quickly, somebody raise your hand. Who's the speaker? Yes. Very good. We already talked about the occasion. Who is the audience, Madison?
Her high school peers and mostly her high school peers and like teachers are there and parents are there, but directed towards.
Right. And that group, of course, includes people that she has offended or hurt. What was her purpose? Let's talk about her purpose. Caden?
Yeah, she's trying to atone for all the awful things she did to her peers and classmates.
Ooh, good vocabulary word. She's trying to atone for all of the horrible things she said and did.
She's trying to like make everyone feel like not pretty, but like that there's no one better than them. Like they're all equal.
So everybody has something to offer. Everybody is a person of value. Okay, good. What was her subject? Chance?
I have that it was the crown and what it represented.
Right. And then that goes back to what you were saying, where she started handing out the pieces of it, that everybody deserves a piece of that crown. And then finally, what are some adjectives that we could use to describe her tone?
Apologetic.
Apologetic. Good, Mydell. Humble. Yeah, she's very humble.
Katie was being very sincere.
Very sincere. Absolutely.
She was like gracious to even get the crown and like to be around.
Right, so she feels honored, gracious, and then she takes the initiative to bestow that honor upon other people. And Chance?
Empowering.
Empowering to others, right? Okay, so if she wanted to accomplish this goal of making everybody feel like they are individuals of value, right? What did she have to keep in mind considering who her particular audience was in order to accomplish that goal? What are some of the things she had to consider as she was giving that speech regarding who she's talking to, what she's trying to accomplish? Sam?
She had to like be relatable to her entire audience. Like she kept making direct speeches to like different types of people and including them and giving examples of like how she was apologetic towards them.
Good, and it included people that she had personally offended or hurt herself.
Right.
What else? What other things did she have to consider about her audience in order to accomplish her purpose?
She like showed appreciation towards each of them.
Mm-hmm. And Bernadette, why would that be important in order for her to accomplish her purpose?
Well, I think that like she wasn't really like grateful towards those people in the beginning because she was like throwing that like fakeness towards her, trying to be somebody that she was not, and like by doing that whole appreciation thing, I feel like she accepted herself too.
Ooh, that's good. And the fact that she's kind of showing people that she has changed sends the message that other people can change too, right? Okay, so we're going to look at another situation, a hypothetical situation. You are the speaker. You have recently been grounded, and you've decided to take the very mature approach of writing a letter to your parents. So they would, of course, be your audience. Your purpose is to convince them whether or not grounding is an effective punishment for teens. So your subject would be grounding, and in order to accomplish this purpose, you are going to need to come off as very serious and humble, okay? So talk very quickly at your tables about what sort of things you might decide to include in this letter to your parents, an audience that you know very well, in order to convince them whether or not it is an effective punishment for teens. First, you might need to decide the answer to that question, and then how would you approach it? Any questions?
Okay, well, first thing I do, I go in there and I sit my papa's lap.
This particular audience, how do you approach it?
Okay, is grounding an effective punishment?
No.
Okay.
Absolutely
Well,
not.
actually, knowing my parents, I think the answer to that question would have to be yes, and the purpose of it would be trying to lessen it to the least extent of grounding, but while still being grounded.
Oh, I got you.
Because, like, I don't think I'd be able to fully get out of being grounded, but I might be able to lessen the
We should probably strive for
the
that.
strictness
Let's
administration.
do that.
Yeah.
It's different. I like
So,
it.
we should start off this letter by saying, Dear Mother and Father.
We should
Dear Betsy
apologize.
and Nate.
Apologize in the letter for what, like, I'm sorry I didn't load the dishwasher, Mom.
Yeah,
I think we need to do as Ms. Gifford always tells us to do, like acknowledge the other side of the argument and then apologize and refute it. So.
yeah,
Like-
like apologize and possibly give any reasoning you had. Like it'd be a good time to get out your excuse for why you did it.
Like, it was wrong of me to not take out the trash. I should have been more responsible.
All right, let's come together for one conversation. Keep that in mind, and let's say now it's the exact same topic, right? Same situation. You're talking about grounding, same subject, but this time you're not talking to your parents. You're writing an opinion piece for the newspaper. Just a short letter in the newspaper that explains your position on whether or not grounding is an effective punishment for teens. what would you talk about in that letter, and how would that differ from when you talked to your parents, an audience that you know very well, right? Very quickly, talk about that.
Okay, well, we couldn't give like personal examples of being like, well, I'm a good kid, so you shouldn't ground me. We can't really say that. Instead,
you have to use like a more formal tone.
yeah, it has to be more formal, and I feel like we'd have to do like a broad like facts, you know, statistics maybe, and you couldn't really do that when you're talking to your parents because I feel like they wouldn't be receptive of that.
Yeah, and it's more like personal whenever it's with your parents, whereas like with the newspaper it has to be
For a wide range of everybody.
And I feel like
Okay, let's come together again for one conversation. Anybody want to tell us what would be the differences in those two different approaches? You have the exact same subject, you have the exact same purpose, but the one thing that changes is your audience, and so you have to change your approach slightly in order to cater to that audience. Sarah?
When you're writing to your parents, you're probably going to apologize for what you did, kind of like, I'm sorry, but to the newspaper you would be like, well, grounding's not very effective, so you'd use like more logic in the newspaper versus emotional to your parents.
So with your parents, it might be much more personal, but with a newspaper audience, it might be a little bit more objective. Okay, good. Anybody else? Courtney?
well, when you're writing like for a newspaper, you have to have a reason for writing. Like you have to be an authority figure in a way. However, if you're writing to your parents, you have to be a lot more respectful of them and sort of placing them above you in a way in order to get what you want.
So that's where that humility and humbling yourself would come into play. Good. Anybody else? Any other differences?
Well, with your parents, you want to be respectful and humble, but you also want to be serious. But when you're talking to like a newspaper letter or something, you're writing a letter, then you want to come at like formal.
Okay, a little bit more formal. Did anybody else talk about in your groups how you would be a little bit more formal? I also heard a lot of you talk about how you would probably use statistics and research, things like that with the newspaper audience, but with some of your parents, that information might not be valuable to them, right? And I think there was this group over here who said, well, Bernadette said bribe your parents with baking. But also, they talked about trying to induce pity, right? Like incite pity in your parents, make them feel sorry for you. But you wouldn't necessarily do that for your newspaper audience. You're not trying to make them feel sorry for you personally. It's a broader topic, right? Any other thoughts on that we haven't touched on?
Miss Ginther is one of the most effective teachers I have ever seen. And what makes her so effective is that she, first and foremost, builds relationships with her students. She finds out what turns them on, what gets them excited, what motivates them. She spends a lot of time building relationships in her classroom, and that automatically endears her to her students and motivates them to work for her. And she incorporates what they love into her curriculum in any way that she can. What they find interesting in their world, contemporary issues, she brings all of that in, and that makes her very effective as a teacher.
So everything that we've discussed so far uses something that we call rhetoric. Has anybody ever heard this term rhetoric before? Some folks may have. So the thing is, you already know what rhetoric is. Even if you cannot formally define it, you already know what it is because it is absolutely everywhere. Rhetoric occurs in every conversation, every movie, every advertisement, every book, even body language, art. Rhetoric is present in all of that. Before we move on, does anybody see the error? There's an error in here. Jane?
You're missing an apostrophe and can't.
Ah, good. Okay, I specifically put this one in here because I've noticed it in your writing that you are not putting that apostrophe with those contractions because I think that you're accustomed to your phone doing it for you, right? But we need to make sure that we remember to do that in our own writing, so good. So the word can't. I assign writing often, and so I assess students' writing often, and I tend to see fairly consistent errors in their writing. And so often what I'll do is after we've had some sort of writing assignment and the next time we do some sort of activity in class where I'm going to be using text on the screen, I will use and incorporate some of the errors that I saw in their writing and have them try to pick those out. And then I'll make sure that they understand this is something that I saw in your writing and that's why we're addressing it now, and usually use that as an opportunity to stop and review those rules about comma splices or apostrophes or whatever it might be. All right, so rhetoric. We might need to get a definition on this. Here's what rhetoric is. It is very simply the art and science of persuasion. You already use it whether you realize it or not. But being conscious of how you use it and how others use it can make you more successful, make you a more able communicator, and more discerning audiences. What are some of the reasons that it's really important, you think, to be able to practice the art and science of persuasion, to be a rhetorician, to understand rhetoric? What are some reasons that this might be a valuable skill? Jane?
To be able to convince people to do things for you.
Ooh, to be able to convince people to do things? Courtney?
It's so that you can understand when people are using rhetoric on you, you know?
To understand when somebody is using rhetoric on you, right? They're trying to shape your thoughts or get you to buy something or something like that. Good. Anybody else? Manny.
It also makes you a more effective speaker or writer.
More effective speaker or writer? Who are some people that we've known throughout history who we would say, well, if rhetoric is the art and science of persuasion, these people nailed it. They are true rhetoricians. Sarah?
Adolf Hitler.
Adolf Hitler. Very good. Hammett?
Like politicians in general?
Politicians in general. Very good. Katie Ann?
Martin Luther King Jr.
Martin Luther King Jr. Ooh, and hands went down. Bernadette?
Abraham Lincoln.
Abraham Lincoln. Give us one more.
Gandhi.
Gandhi. All right, really last one, Caden.
I was going to say Gandhi.
Gandhi. Oh, popular one. Okay, so this is what rhetoric is. Anybody see the error in there, by the way? Read carefully. This is one I've also seen in your writing. Did you figure it out, Paula?
Is it you have already used it?
No? Chance?
You hit the space bar twice between successful
No,
and maybe.
that's not it! Chance! You are too much of a discerning audience, okay? Nobody sees it?
Oh, I know.
Okay, what?
The comma be inside the parenthesis?
No.
Like, is it like
Oh,
on
I
the first
know.
one?
You don't need the apostrophe in others?
Yes, this right here. What's wrong with that? Somebody explain to me what was wrong with it. It had other apostrophe S. When we say other apostrophe S, Sam, how many people are we talking about?
Just one.
Just one, but what did we intend here?
Plural.
We intended for it to be plural. So that's the S apostrophe, and that is something that I constantly see in your writing. So paying attention to those apostrophes and how we're using them. The gallery walk is designed to help students walk through some of those concepts, the rhetorical appeals and the techniques that people would often use in text and that students would use themselves when they're practicing their skills as rhetoricians. And so what it does is it takes those concepts and puts them into bite-sized pieces so that students can move from one to one easily and have just a foundation for what they're going to be looking for and what they're going to be doing in their own reading and writing. On our gallery walk, and this is like stations that we've done before, you will just work with the folder at your table and there's a list of instructions for you inside. There's also something for you to take notes on, and then once we finish at the first station, we'll move to the next one. Any questions? Okay, so go ahead and open up your folder. You should see a gold sheet in there, and then there should be also white sheets for everyone to take notes on. So make sure everybody in your group gets a copy of that. Start at the top. Read the explanations. Look at the examples. There are multiple examples. Talk about them. And then finally, there's a small assignment at the bottom. And on your note-taking guide where it's asking you for examples, those are examples that you come up with, not the ones that were on the gold sheet. Okay? All right, any questions? Okay, so let's get started on that. Start at the top.
Okay, where do we see rhetoric?
Everywhere.
Everywhere.
And then rhetoric is the art of persuasion.
Art and science.
And science. Because there's methodology to it. There's formula to it.
It's known as pathos or emotional appeal. This occurs
So emotional appeal.
Or logical appeal. This occurs when the speaker offers reasonable premises and proofs, develop ideas with appropriate details, and make sure the reader can follow the progression of ideas.
I gave the students examples that used the different appeals and techniques. So for instance, the emotional appeal. So I gave them examples of an advertisement, I think for the ASPCA, that had sad-looking puppies on there and other examples, and then asked the students as a group to come up with a definition and understanding of what that concept actually meant. So what is emotional appeal? What does it mean to appeal to an audience's emotion? And I prefer to teach that way because I think that if students can construct their own meaning, then they have a better chance of really understanding and being able to apply those concepts.
It'd be a smarter choice to pick the salad rather than paying for an expensive trainer.
Good, Veronica.
Thank you.
All right, what's another example?
An anti-smoking ad lists the negative health effects of smoking, such as the possibility of cancer, suppressed immune function, possibility of gum and lung disease, and raised blood pressure.
So that definitely uses like fear tactics.
Yeah.
Gives like scientific facts.
Yeah,
and,
it's like
science.
proven facts.
Okay, so leave behind the gallery walk instructions. We're going to rotate to the next gallery. So if you are at 1, go to 2, 2 go to 3, 3 go to 4, 4 go to 1. The only thing you need is your pencil and your notes. You'll come back to your home table eventually. Okay? All right, let's rotate. All right, so figure out which appeal or technique you have and find it on your notes.
2 examples.
Two examples of a logical
appeal.
Yeah.
So what do you guys think?
The money thing, like, oh, you're gonna save money by buying this.
That's always a big one. So like specifically in McDonald's ads, how they'll be like, it's $1.
Recently, like
Value menu, like you're doing value, like.
Would you like to value size it?
Yeah.
And then like anything that's on sale, like even if it's like 10% off.
Yeah.
Like you still see, oh, it's a sale.
Yeah, how they'll have.
I can't get it cheaper for any
It's like $1 off, but it doesn't matter. It's on sale.
They'll have like the stickers and they'll cross off the
All right, it looks like we're finishing up at this gallery, so let's leave behind the gallery instructions, take our materials with us again, rotate one more time. All right, find which appeal or technique you have and then find it on your notes sheet.
We have logos.
So Ms. Ginther incorporates a lot of collaborative group work, and that goes back to her classroom being one of a family and also being one of teaching students that in the real world, when they leave high school, they're going to have to work with other people, and strategies for how to do that, that each of them has a role to play, and each of them not only has their own individual role to play, but they have to figure out how those roles fit in with the roles that other students are playing as well. So she does a lot of collaborative group work based on their strengths and weaknesses. She pairs students very carefully and deliberately. When she constructs those groups, she takes into consideration personality, ability level, and a lot of times just their backgrounds. So she's gotten to know them really well and know what they can and cannot do and what they're going to be able to do well together. She also gives them a lot of choice in that, so that they learn personal responsibility, and it teaches them that they don't live on an island by themselves, that they really do need other people to help them succeed, and the right way to use that. She does a lot of individual work as well, and so they also understand that even if it's a collaborative assignment, that they're each graded individually. And I think with that understanding, she accomplishes 2 goals at the same time, the personal responsibility, but also how to work well with other people.
As we finish up this gallery walk, did you learn today things that you did not know previously? Yes. Okay, what were some of the more beneficial things that you learned that you had never heard of or not aware of before regarding rhetoric and persuasion and argument? Katie Ann?
That rhetoric is used in everything.
Rhetoric is used in everything. Can you give us some examples?
Like in the commercials where they've got like sad puppies and really sad music.
So advertisements, right? That's one place that it's used. So where did you see it used in some of your stations?
We saw it in the in the Pathos with the like puppy ads.
Okay, so we saw it in advertisement. Did lots of groups see advertisement? What were some other places that we saw it? The idea that rhetoric is everywhere. Jane?
In like famous people's speeches.
Ooh, famous speeches. Good. Anything else?
Advertisements.
We said advertisements, right? Did we say that one? Got that one.
Like stores, like with prices and stuff, if they just like mark out and they're like sale, like no matter how much it's off, people just see that. And
Ooh,
like,
interesting. Okay.
You're saving money.
All right, so rhetoric really is everywhere. We see it in speeches, we see it in advertisement, we see it in the stories. I think if, like at the anecdote narrative one, there were a story there that uses the imagery. Rhetoric is everywhere. What else did you learn today? Let's talk about the appeals. What are the 3 appeals, first of all?
Logos, ethos, and pathos.
Logos, ethos, pathos. Okay, now Aristotle said logos is the primary one. In fact, Aristotle actually said he wishes that humankind could just rely on logos alone, but because we are humans, we are able to be influenced in other ways, like ethics and emotions and that sort of thing. But for him, logos was the primary one. So what is logos? Somebody explain to us what logos is. What did you learn today about logos? Veronica?
When you're using logos, you want to seem reasonable and knowledgeable about the topic.
Good. Can you give us an example?
When Wendy's was advertising their salad, they said it's much cheaper to purchase a salad instead of a personal trainer because it's healthy.
Right, which is obviously very logical.
Obviously.
Good. What else is logos? What is it based on? Madison?
It's based on like the message that's being given.
The message? You want to make sure that that message comes off in what ways?
As like, it's like reasonable and logical. Like everything about the argument is facts that can't be argued.
Okay, so you want to have evidence, you want to be able to support your topic. Very good. All right, what's another one? We said logos. What's another one? Manny, give me another one.
Pathos.
Pathos. All right, tell us about pathos. Who can tell us about pathos? Katie Ann?
It's the emotional appeal, and it like appeals to your, well, more like your senses.
Not your senses.
Pulling on heartstrings.
Pulling on heartstrings. What are some emotions that human beings feel?
Fear.
Fear.
Empathy.
Empathy.
Joy.
Joy.
Sadness.
Sadness.
Well, when I think of pathos, I think of passion, like emotion.
Ooh, pathos and passion. That's a really good way to remember it. Caden.
Guilt.
Guilt. How many of you remember the puppy advertisement? Right? For your example, how many of you cued like the Sarah McLachlan, ASPCA, Arms of an Angel? Right? Pulling that guilt. You want to do something, you feel that empathy. And then what about ethical appeal? This is the one that students often struggle with the most. What is ethos, ethical appeal? What is that? Anybody? Samantha.
It like builds the credibility of the speaker so that the audience like knows that they know what they're talking about and you can trust them.
Right, so it's the credibility of the speaker. That one has to do purely with the speaker. The speaker wants to come up as logical and reasonable in terms of the message, which was what Veronica had mentioned. But additionally, the speaker wants to come off as somebody that you can trust, right? Somebody that has been trusted in the past. Chance.
A good example of ethical appeal could be Frederick Douglass talking about slavery. He was a slave himself, so he's a logical person to talk about it.
Yeah, high five. Frederick Douglass. Right? Frederick Douglass talks about slavery and the plight of slaves and overcoming slavery. Is he a credible source for that topic? Definitely. Yes. And it's going to be more powerful. His message is going to be more powerful because he can establish that ethical appeal, that ethos. Right?